this is one of New Zealand's darkest days. Clearly, what has happened here is an extraordinary and unprecedented act of violence.
Wow. Straight to a Fox News alert, and that's what we're talking about. 49 people dead after gunfire erupts inside two mosques.
Police charging one man with murder overnight as the normally peaceful nation remains on high alert.
Kitty Logan is following our story from our European newsroom and joins us live. Kitty?
Good morning, guys. Well, the shootings happened at two different mosques in the city of Christchurch, that's on the southern island of New Zealand. And police are saying that these attacks were very well planned. The shootings started at around 1:45 p.m. local time. That's when the mosques are very busy with people attending Friday prayers. The attack lasted around 5 minutes. Police say 41 people died at just one of those mosques. Many of the victims are thought to be refugees. Now, witnesses say the gunman wore black military-style clothing. Police also found two bombs in one car which didn't go off. They're being defused. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, has condemned these shootings as a terrorist attack. And police have since detained 4 suspects. They were arrested immediately after the shootings. One man in his late 20s has already been charged with murder. Authorities have not named him, but an Australian man is being linked to the attack. This man also posted a lengthy anti-immigration manifesto online in which he claimed responsibility. A graphic video of the shooting was also posted online. That has been removed, but it is sadly still circulating. Police say none of the suspects that they have detained so far were on any previous terror watch lists. Now, at least 20 people were also injured in these shootings. They were rushed to hospitals for emergency treatment. Police have cordoned off the area. They've urged people to stay indoors for now, and as night falls, that city remains in lockdown. Now, New Zealand hasn't seen a mass shooting or any kind of mass shooting in at least 40 years, so this is certainly the worst the country has ever seen. The security alert has now been heightened, but for now the country remains in shock. Back to you guys.
All right, Kitty, thank you very much. You're right about the security being heightened. There are 1,000 police in New Zealand and in the Christchurch area, and almost everybody, it's all hands on deck right now. They would hate to think that this was part of a coordinated attack. Right now, it does not look like there was more than these people who were involved. Right now, only one man is charged with murder. But, you know, as she painted, he had this big manifesto that Ainsley's got in her hands. He wired up his cars. There were a couple of IEDs on his cars, and then he live streamed the whole thing on Facebook. Went 17 minutes. We're not going to show the guy's face. We're not going to tell you his name. He wanted notoriety. We're not going to give it to him.
Well, this manifesto, if you read it, I mean, he answers questions. He highlights questions that he thinks that you at home might want to ask him, like, what are your wishes? What do you encourage us to do? He talks about socialism, left wing, right wing, birth rates. And he said he started planning this 2 years ago after the terror attack in Stockholm. That really set him off in 2017. And he says this was to avenge the deaths of his people. He wasn't planning on doing this in New Zealand until he visited some of the mosques in Christchurch. And he said he sees that there is a problem there, too. Basically, he says he doesn't hate Muslims if they stay in their countries and they don't invade his land.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez put this out on a tweet. At first, I thought of saying, imagine being told your house of faith isn't safe anymore, but I can't say imagine because of Charleston, Pittsburgh, and Southern Springs. What good are thoughts and prayers when they don't even keep the pews safe?
Oh, yeah. Some of the churches here in New York, you have to stand in line, and it takes a very long time to get into the sanctuary because they're using wands and metal detectors to make sure you don't have anything that's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Apparently, he was able to live stream this thing on Facebook, and Facebook has taken it down, but it is floating around on the internet. Apparently, he had a GoPro on his helmet, and you can see he turned it on as he headed toward that first mosque where he killed 40 people, and you can hear him say, let's get this party started. And then he pulled up and he started firing, and then he pulls away. We are getting into our newsroom right now some of the video where a hero cop actually pulls him out of his car. And we're going to be showing that to you very, very shortly.
Just tells you how sick he is that he thinks murdering this many people is a party while they're in their mosques.
It's unbelievable. Anyway, we will keep you posted on what is going on down in New Zealand on this Friday morning.
All right, 4 minutes now after the hour. Let's change gears and talk about what happened on Capitol Hill yesterday and that Immigration Border Patrol action the president is trying to get done to repurpose money in order to secure our border. So he did it, and the Senate went ahead, the House went ahead and said we're going to disapprove this, and the Senate did too, by a count of 59-41, with 12 Republicans deciding they cannot support the president on this for constitutional reasons. I don't know one Republican, and if Democrats were given truth serum, I'm sure they feel the same way, that doesn't think there's a crisis or an emergency at our border. But the president tweeted this out. He didn't go out for revenge. He didn't rebuke. He didn't warn. He said this: I look forward to vetoing the just passed Democrat-inspired resolution, which would open borders while increasing crime, drugs, and trafficking in our country. I thank all the strong Republicans who voted to support the border security and our desperately needed wall.
Well, the night before, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, and Ben Sasse showed up unannounced at the White House, and the president was having a dinner, and they tried to talk him out of vetoing and instead adopt a compromise. And I'm told the president was really steamed that they showed up and tried to talk him out of it. I mean, this is one of his core issues. He has said there is a crisis at our southern border, and we have shown you many people who are professionals who say exactly that.
Well,
and for these Republicans, these dozen Republicans, to fly in the face of the leader of your party, you know, you've got to figure they're going to take some flack from people who voted for them.
Yeah, well, you might want to know who these senators are if you live in their states. It was Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Lamar Alexander, Mitt Romney, Jerry Moran, Pat Toomey, Rob Portman, Roger Wicker, Marco Rubio, and Roy Blunt. Senator Romney said that it's about the Constitution, the balance of power. This has nothing to do with border security, because he says he does support a barrier. Tom Tillis went in there. He was going to oppose this, and he changed his mind at the last minute. The Republican from North Carolina, he says he's sympathetic to the president's push. The president really wanted this measure he really wanted to have his emergency order supported by these, especially Republican senators, but they weren't all on board.
They're worried about a Democratic senator, Democratic president that would want to do things that are against something a Republican would want to do, like do something, emergency action on climate change, and take some money from one pot and say, hey, President Trump did that back in 2019. Meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham, also a lawyer by trade before he got into politics, said the president had every right to do this.
Process to reject his decision. That process is happening right now. The president will prevail, but I don't think for a moment they're not sincere. I just disagree with their analysis, and we're going to keep building the wall. It means that he's dead serious about building the wall, and if a Republican or Democrat gets in the way, he's willing to build the wall.
A lot of people might want to say that the president's doing this and just exercising his power, that I'm in charge. Don't forget that. But when you hear Tom Homan talk, and he said, no, the president really believes this is an emergency. And he says, I've worked on the border. I know that this is a crisis. I know that there's an emergency. And when you see these images of people throwing children over the fence to distract the border guards so that smugglers and migrants can come through, that is an emergency. If you're a parent, imagine if that's your child.
And keep in mind, the president has the power to do what he is doing. So what happens now that they have approved this resolution of disapproval, now it's going to go to the president's desk where he's going to sign it. It's going to be like, I'm not going to sign that. That's bad for me. He's going to veto that. And then what's going to happen next is he's going to take some of the money that he has already told us about, and he's going to say, I'm going to use that to build the wall, and then there will be a court challenge. This could take 6 months, it could take a year, it could take years. But nonetheless, as he runs for president, then the president's going to be able to say, look, I did everything I could. I even vetoed that thing. There were a bunch of Republicans who voted against me. I'm doing what I promised I would do, and that's why I'm fighting for that.
And they are building portions of the wall. Mark Morgan was on with us earlier and says Congress has failed. This is policy. Not only barrier, it's policy. Listen.
Congress has failed to do its job to protect this border. The politicians know this is a crisis. This was purely about politics, identity politics, political ideology. They know there's an issue at the border. They're failing to do their job. So if I had 2 seconds with the president, I'd look him in the eye and say, thank you. Thank you for doing what other people have not done and failed to do to protect our border. I absolutely hope he vetoes this.
Some of these senators that voted with the Democrats, maybe their thought process is, I want to follow the Constitution. In my opinion, I feel like I have to follow the Constitution and power of the purse. rules, but they still support the border wall and they
Sure.
still support the president. So maybe they're just doing that so that they can go back and look at their voting record when it comes time for the election and say, we did the right thing according to the Constitution.
And the president does not have to veto it. He could use the $1.3 billion that Congress has appropriated for the wall. Plus, there's like $3 billion in a couple of funds at the Pentagon and the Treasury in accounts that can be tapped for an emergency
But he's going to veto it.
So he could do.
He
doesn't have to veto
tweeted
it.
out
He
right
could do
after
that.
this vote came down at 3:16, one word, veto.
Yeah, so stay tuned. Let's see what happens.
The House should have done this 2 years ago, and they put the president in this position, led to lockout as well as this.
And that's why the president says, thanks, Paul Ryan.
Yeah, 10 minutes now after the hour. Thanks to Jillian Milley for showing up today. Russ, I'd be tossed to an empty camera.
You are welcome. Just for you. That is
you.
the only
Happy
reason I came
Friday.
here today. Happy Friday. Let's get to this Fox News alert right now. And we are following some serious news. A rocket attack on Tel Aviv may have been a mistake. Israeli media quoting defense sources saying the rockets may have been fired during routine maintenance. Overnight, Israel retaliating with 100 airstrikes on terror sites in Gaza. The Israelis targeting several Hamas sites, including its headquarters and where they store weapons. An all-out mafia war could be brewing in New York City after mob boss Frankie Cali is gunned down outside his home. Reports this morning, authorities are eyeing John Gotti's brother, Gene Gotti, another member of the Gambino crime family, is 6 months out of prison and could be looking to get back into the family business. Police believe Cali was lured outside his Staten Island home by a staged car crash. Let's talk now about extreme weather. A powerful winter storm triggering several tornadoes across the Midwest and Alabama. A fierce hailstorm slamming southern Indiana. Look at that. One tornado completely gutting a western Kentucky church. The bomb cyclone that paralyzed the Rockies moved into Nebraska, dropping heavy snow and rain. And in Colorado, a family of 4 rescued by strangers after being trapped in their car for 12 hours. Alex Trebek is thanking everyone who's wished him well in his battle with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
For the kind words, the prayers, and the advice you have offered, I'm a lucky guy.
The 78-year-old Jeopardy host who revealed his diagnosis last week says he received messages from hundreds of thousands of people, and I'm sure that will continue to grow. Evan Watson, the IBM computer, sent Trebek a get well soon card. So those are going to continue to keep coming in. I mean, he's beloved by so many people all across.
What a great attitude, though. He says, I'm so lucky, so fortunate.
Some experimental drugs kept Jimmy Carter alive. Maybe it's going to do the same thing here.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, thanks, Jillian.
All right. Meanwhile, what's it like to work for Amazon? One former employee calls it hell. You'll hear from her coming up.
Wow. Plus, stop playing the national anthem at sporting events. It's a column in USA Today. Joey Jones lost both his legs in Afghanistan. We bet he's got something to say about this.
Hey, Joey. A lot of us like hearing the national anthem before sporting events. Well, according to the USA Today sports team, the national anthem is a lazy form of patriotism. They argue it's time to stop playing the national anthem at sporting events in the United States.
The piece says, quote, the kind of faux display of national pride better suited for countries run by dictators or despots.
All right, so here to react, retired U.S. Marine Corps bomb technician, lost both his legs in Afghanistan. Joey Jones is with us. Joey, you read the column in USA Today. Your thoughts? Is it faux patriotism?
No, it's not faux patriotism. She makes some good points. We get lazy about it, and nothing bothers me more than when someone's walking around and chewing gum, or like she said, hitting one of those smoke machines during the national anthem. But at the end of the day, isn't that more reason why we should demand or at least put societal pressure on one another to respect it, stop what you're doing for a moment, and remember, hey, there are men and women that lost their lives for this. One thing I would say to her is that when I'm at one of those sporting events, it means something to me. When Gold Star moms and dads are at those events, it means something to them. And for that reason alone, it's worth something that we should continue to do.
Well, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say the last line is if we truly want to honor those who serve our country, then how about ensuring our veterans have adequate health care, improving underperforming schools so every child has an equal shot, and prohibiting discrimination in all forms.
As if it's an either or. As if we can't respect.
You can have everything.
And I can talk for days on that. We can talk about vouchers and school choice and all those things that would remedy those problems. But for a moment, why don't we come together before a sporting event, something that is nothing more than a game, yet we put all this passion into it, and that anthem right before this game reminds us, wow, there's something bigger than this.
Right.
All this passion we feel we could put into each other.
People are reacting on social media. Catherine says, no way. Those are the moments that the true patriots harmonize together. I've always been super proud to be an American. Another lady, Mary, says she gets goosebumps and she tears up, thanking the brave men and women.
A lot of people do.
In this piece, she says, imagine if before a concert, the band stopped and made you attend the national anthem. Well, listen, I work for a country music star, and he does something to honor patriotism at every single show. And we bring out a veteran or a service member on the stage, and then you have 30, 40, 50 at the National Football Championship, 90,000 people screaming USA. It means something to those people. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when else are you going to do it? So they say it's supposed to honor patriotism. Okay, we don't go to school anymore. There's no Pledge of Allegiance to start the day.
Yeah.
So at national anthems, when you go to a major or small event, national anthem is a great way to ground people.
It's an opportunity of unity. I won't even get started on rather not kneeling and those things. We still do it. We still respect it. And rather than because the bottom 10% doesn't observe it, let's scrap it. How about we put a little bit of pressure back on that bottom 10% to, this is why we do it. Explain it to them, reach a hand out and get them to observe it with us. It means a lot to me.
This is all part of USA Today's series, Things We'd Like to Change in Sports. Something I'd like to change in sports? How about if beer was less than $25 a glass? Just saying.
Or hot dogs.
Right. But you still spend it, Steve, and you'll have 7 or 8 of them, and it comes out of your kid's college fund.
That's my kids went to college.
Okay, good.
Joey, you'll be on Fox over the weekend?
Yes. We'll do the Gutfeld show and maybe later today on the network. Yeah.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir.
We always love having you here. Thank you for serving all that you've gone through.
Thank you.
The Covington Catholic students family has already sued the Washington Post and CNN. Are more lawsuits coming? We're going to ask the attorney coming up.
Plus, the IRS could actually owe you money, but you had better act fast. We'll explain coming up next.
Hi. Time now for some news by the numbers. Let's get started. First, $1.4 billion. That's the amount of tax refunds the IRS has been waiting to be claimed. The refunds belong to taxpayers who didn't file a return in 2015. If those taxpayers don't file by April 15th, the money will go to the Treasury. Good, we need it. Next, $15,000. That's how much UFC fighter Conor McGregor faces in a lawsuit over smashing a cell phone. The victim accuses McGregor of stomping on the phone while he tried taking a picture of him in Miami at 5 in the morning. McGregor is charged with strong-armed robbery and criminal mischief. And finally, $500. That's the cost of this woman's purse as she begged for money. Police say the fake bum was also carrying an iPhone while claiming she had no.
Joins us right now from Cincinnati. Todd, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start at the beginning. Why are you going after CNN and the Washington Post?
First off, the Washington Post was the first media outlet out of the gate with the story. They were the first one to cross over from Twitter to the media. And secondarily, CNN is, of all the offenders, perhaps the largest, with a very significant following, with serving approximately 450 million households worldwide with 41 million Twitter followers. So they have great reach in what they do. So that's why we picked those two first.
Are more lawsuits on the way?
Absolutely. We will continue to roll out lawsuits, about 1 a month. We anticipate that we will have 12 to 14 lawsuits total. After that, we may look more broadly at people on Twitter who attempted to dox Nicholas Sandmann.
Right. And so, Todd, there were a lot of people who went out when the video first went viral, and people got the story wrong. They said that your client got up in the face of the Native American and was mocking him. As we have seen in subsequent videos, that was not the case. He was simply standing there, and the Native American, Mr. Phillips, walked up to him. So you're suing people, organizations that put the story out there and never corrected it, right?
Correct. I mean, first off, we think that people that went with the initial unsourced video, which had gone viral, they did so without any reasonable reporting. Some organizations, their reporting evolved, but for example, with CNN, While their reporting evolved, they did not report the entire truth, and they've never apologized or retracted for the lies that they put forth in their reporting.
Todd, I remember when you guys, when all this was unfolding, you said, look, this story has not been told accurately, but if you come out and you apologize and you get the story straight, then we won't sue you. Has anyone apologized or come out and said, look, we're sorry, we didn't know the whole story when we reported it?
No one has actually apologized to Nicholas Sandmann. The Washington Post put forth an editor's note that did not apologize. It merely corrected the reporting but was inadequate. As we go forward, we will give media organizations an opportunity to retract and apologize as allowed by Kentucky law. But so far, no one has apologized.
And Todd, finally, ultimately, you're trying to send a message here, aren't you? Because these are gigantic sums of money you're asking for.
Correct. We put out a video which is called Nicholas versus the Media Giants, and that video really proposes the following ideas. One, that Nicholas Sandmann is absolutely innocent. Number two, that all of us in this country have a shared mutual interest in having media that reports accurately. And three, that through this lawsuit with Nicholas Sandmann, that we intend to hold the media giants accountable. So it is a David and Goliath fight, but we do intend to fight it.
Okay. Todd, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
President Trump set to veto the measure blocking his emergency declaration for the border. Congressman Adam Kinzinger was just deployed to the border and says the emergency is real, and he's on deck.
Good morning, Congressman. Plus, part two of Brian's exclusive with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, what the Secretary reveals about our tech race against China, coming up.
We are back with a Fox News alert. New Zealand now on high alert. At least 49 gunned down in what's being called a terrorist attack on 2 mosques. Many of the victims are believed to be migrants or refugees in New Zealand. 4 people now in custody.
All right, police say 1 Australian man is charged with the murder and will appear in court tomorrow morning. Yep, he's alive. He's said to have an anti-Muslim and anti-immigration agenda.
Video of the attack was live streamed on Facebook, but authorities there are urging people not to share it. It has been taken down, but it is circulating. Prime Minister is condemning the shootings. They are referring to this as New Zealand's darkest day. And while this person clearly wanted attention by live streaming it, we're not going to show his name. We're not going to use his name. We're not going to show his face. But you know, there were hints out there because on his Twitter feed, apparently there were images of ammunition magazines with names scrawled across them in white marker, including the names of 2 mass shooters who targeted migrants and Muslims.
He was there in New Zealand training, according to his manifesto that he wrote. And he wasn't planning on doing this in Christchurch, but he said he started visiting some of the mosques and looking at websites and determined that these individuals, basically, according to this manifesto, he's a sick man. He's saying that they deserved it because he was avenging the deaths of his people from other terrorist attacks.
Yeah, one of the witnesses and a survivor said this. He just came in, he started shooting. I just lied down there on the bench thinking that if I get out, I'll get shot. So if I get up, I'll get shot. Oh, wow. So I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed so I could be alive. I was the last guy to come out of the mosque after the shooting stopped, and in the doors there were a lot of bodies.
Wow.
So again, first we heard 20, then we heard 40, and then it topped out at 49 with 20 severely injured. I did not know this when I had a chance to go to the State Department yesterday and talk to the Secretary of State, but there were 3 separate stories even developing when I got on Amtrak until when I got in the doors. Just imagine what it's like to be Secretary of State. So here is a few minutes, or about 5-6 minutes, of our 20-minute sit-down with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, great to see you.
Brian, it's great to be with you.
The first time since 2014, if my stats are correct, the rockets came out of Gaza into Israel.
The Israelis have the right to defend themselves. I'm confident that they will be able to do that. I regret that the folks in the Gaza Strip, probably Hamas, although I suppose we shouldn't speculate, fire these rockets and put Israelis at risk. Right. This only presents an increased risk of escalation, something that we hope doesn't happen, but you should know we will support the Israelis' right to defend themselves.
Do you worry how much the anti-Israeli, anti-Semitic language coming out, mostly the Democratic side in Congress, hurts long-term the Israeli-American relations?
I do. I worried about it for multiple reasons, not just the relationship between these 2 democracies, but I worry about it because it undermines where we began today, Brian. the protection of the dignity and rights and the religious freedom of every human being. And so when I hear anti-Semitic remarks, it saddens me, and I know it undermines what is the greatest about the United States of America.
Seeing you and the president walk away in Hanoi, you do a great job keeping a poker face. But as the president spoke and talked about the deal you weren't going to have, do you feel personally that you let him down?
I don't. I think we made real progress, even in Hanoi, even a place where we didn't reach the final resolution of what we've been asking for all along. We didn't get an agreement for the full and final denuclearization in a verified way. This is a long process. The president's always said if we can keep missiles from flying and keep nuclear tests from happening, that's a good first start. We know what the final objective is.
It looks like the president and President Xi, if they are to meet at Mar-a-Lago, it's not going to happen until at the earliest mid-April. What's going on here?
So real progress has been made. I think that's absolutely true. I think both leaders want to make sure that we've had enough progress so that the two seniors, President Xi and President Trump, can get together and close out any of the remaining items. Whether it's the beginning of April, the middle of April, or if it even takes a couple of weeks longer, we ought to get this right. And I'm very hopeful that the two leaders can come together to get a trade deal that will benefit not only America, but the rest of the world as well.
So your message to the Venezuelan people, how much more garbage do they have to eat before America gets more directly involved?
Boy, when I think about how bad it is today and what I know it's going to be like tomorrow and the day after that, it's going to get worse. The Maduro regime is truly evil, denying food to the hungry, denying medicine to the sick. We've delivered. The American people have been so generous, 200 metric tons of food on their borders they won't let in. We are continuing to take efforts.
Have we put troops into Colombia ready to act should they need to act?
It's a fine question, and I'll let the Department of Defense talk about their movements of their
So you're passing
soldiers.
the question?
I am, yes.
I understand you're making a trip to the Middle East. Iraq and Iran meeting, forging relationships. Iraq's ignoring the sanctions, and Grand Ayatollah Sistani sat down with the president of Iran. It seems like in terms of soft power and diplomatic power, we're getting our butts kicked over there. What's happening?
Yeah, I don't see it that way. America has been a strong supporter of Iraq. We still are working to take down ISIS in their country. I had a conversation with our prime minister just a couple days back. I think we're making progress on developing a strong, independent, sovereign Iraq, but there's no doubt Iran has its eyes set on taking control of that country. I don't think that's good for the Iraqi people. I know it's not good for the United States of America, and we're going to continue to do the CT fight there and stand up an Iraqi government that's free and less involved with what's going on in Iraq.
Is it true that members of the Taliban 5, that what the previous administration let out of Gitmo, they are part of these peace talks right now, the ones that we exchanged for Bo Bergdahl, many of which described the worst of the worst? Is that true?
I don't want to answer who's been showing up there. I will say this.
Is that acceptable if they are?
I'll say this. We've negotiated with some really bad people. State Department doesn't often get to choose exactly who it is. We're trying to achieve good security outcomes for the American people. Sometimes we end up talking to some really bad folks.
And they would be okay to stay in that room as far as you're concerned?
If we can deliver security for the American people, we'll talk to just about anyone.
Before I came in here, it became clear that Republicans have jumped ship and decided to not vote with a piece of legislation that does not go along with the president's need for emergency money at the border. Do you side with the 59 that voted against the president, or do you side with the 41 that voted with him?
Count me in the 41.
Why?
I've spent a lot of time with my Mexican counterparts. This challenge at our southern border is real. I believe it's a crisis, but call it what you will. The challenge of not knowing who's coming in and out of our country and what drugs or people or illicit materials might be coming across our southern border is real. We need to take serious action against it, and the president's executive order does just that.
Your predecessor famously basically admitted that he called the president a moron. You have a much different relationship with him. What does he not get that you get?
My relationship with the president is one that's an effort on my part to execute his vision for America's foreign policy. He's the commander-in-chief. He provides the direction. I go out every day and work my tail off to try and execute it and implement it for him.
So a story on you today that talked about why is the Secretary of State doing so much traveling in the country from Iowa to Texas to Kansas? Is he running for president? Is he running for Senate?
I suppose everybody gets unhappy when I don't go to Martha's Vineyard like my predecessors did. They traveled domestically too. America's our first client, and I wanted to go out to Iowa to talk about China and trade and why it matters. I went to Texas this week to talk about energy and how American innovation and creativity have created enormous wealth for America. And I'm going back to Kansas next week to talk about entrepreneurship. I'm doing this on behalf of America. I'm very focused on what I'm doing here today.
Are you ruling out running for the Senate in Kansas?
I have. I've told folks I'm not going to do that.
Long term, would I be surprised in 2024 if you're running for president?
I don't know if you'd be, but my wife would be shocked.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You forget, number one in his class at West Point and a Harvard grad, and constitutionally, he thinks the president's on the money with what he's doing, but he's got his hands full.
I like how transparent he is. He seems like he's answering the questions.
He is.
Except the ones that are national security. Exactly. But.
And I like the fact that he talked about why he went out to Iowa, because the farmers are impacted by the trade imbalance and the trade deals, and he went to explain what the government's doing.
And I will real quick on 5G. It is a major deal. We warned Poland. We warned Germany. Don't do it. Don't take it from the Chinese company. And they seem to be doing it anyway. I'm wondering why our allies are ignoring us.
We're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
All right. Great job. Good job going down to Foggy Bottom.
Yep. Thanks. 20 minutes before the top of the hour. There's Jillian.
That's right. Good morning. We're following a number of stories starting with this, and we are now getting our first look at one of the mangled black boxes from that doomed Ethiopian Airlines jet. Meantime, we're learning the pilot of that Boeing 737 MAX 8 reported serious trouble right after takeoff, with the plane accelerating wildly. The New York Times reporting within 3 minutes of takeoff, the pilot wanted to turn around. We'll keep you updated on that story. A top general warning that Google is indirectly helping the Chinese military.
The work that Google is doing in China is indirectly benefiting the Chinese military. Look, we're the good guys. We watch with great concern when industry partners work in China, knowing that there is that indirect benefit.
Marine General Joseph Dunford making those remarks while testifying at a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing. The tech company did not renew a contract with the armed forces on a drone project, but is still allegedly working to develop a search engine for the Chinese government. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi voicing her support on lowering the voting age.
I myself have always been for lowering the voting age to 16. I think it's really important to capture kids when they're in high school, when they're interested in all of this, when they're learning about government, to be able to vote.
Last week, Congress voted down an amendment headed by Democrats. Let's look at your headlines.
All right. And by the way, Mike Pompeo answered that about Google. He's seething. He seems to be seething about Google's deciding to not take our contract, but to go help China's indirectly military, their defense. Unbelievable.
Jillian, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jillian. 42 minutes after the top of the hour, Beto O'Rourke is in the race, but how does he stack up to the rest of the 2020 candidates? We're breaking down his chances next.
Plus, Alex Trebek thanking fans for overwhelming support after his cancer diagnosis. The new message from the Jeopardy host coming up.
I don't think there's ever been a greater moment in our lifetimes and for this country. The challenges have never been greater, more severe, more critical, and more defining for the future.
There you got Beto O'Rourke kicking off his presidential campaign, standing on the counter there in Iowa. He was in Iowa a couple of days more there. He's now one of 12 candidates vying for the Democratic nomination for president. So how does he stack up against the other 2020 hopefuls? Here to break it all down is former campaign pollster for Senator Ted Cruz, Chris Wilson. Chris, good to have you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's take a look at Beto O'Rourke versus some of the others. When you square him against Joe Biden, who he's hiring staff, he's going to get in shortly. Who's the advantage go to?
Well, I think you have to look a little bit at the background. Joe Biden still has an Obama shine around him. And even though if O'Rourke's got any advantages here, it's his youth, but I think Biden's able to overcome that through the organization's built. And even though that's not the sort of Democratic establishment that you see on Twitter, it's still who makes the difference. And so because of that, I think in a head-to-head, who has the most staying power, if you will, in a primary contest, Biden wins that because of his Obama connections.
Well, you know what? Maybe this would be called the O'Biden ticket if he decides decides to be the vice president.
That would be a strong one.
All right. As you square Beto against Elizabeth Warren.
You know, the one thing, they both have a bit of an inauthentic aspect to them. O'Rourke sort of tried to run as to climb a Hispanic mantle, even though he's an Irish American running as a Texas congressman.
Right.
But Elizabeth Warren can't get around her cultural misappropriation.
That was a big.
It's a big scandal, and I think what you're going to see is New Hampshire is going to eliminate her from the race altogether because of that, and O'Rourke's able to come through because of authenticity. That's
all right. Next stop, Kamala Harris, who, we should point out, when she declared she was going to run for president, had the biggest crowd in the history of crowds out in Oakland, California.
Yeah, but in her hometown. That's a big difference. So O'Rourke was smart. He went up to Iowa. He was able to, the buzz around his campaign, I think, is what you just cannot get around. The Vanity Fair piece, all the coverage that we see yesterday, the fact that we're sitting here this morning talking about it, and Harris kind of dripped it down. The other thing is she's a Clinton Democrat. But because of the media buzz, I think who's able to make it out longer? O'Rourke does. He stays in.
Just like that. And then, ultimately, in this cycle, it seems like everybody's trying to out-Bernie. So where do those two?
They are. Well, if O'Rourke has an advantage there, it's on the youthful side. You know, most Democrats don't want an old white male, but the fact is Sanders is able to get as far to O'Rourke's left. O'Rourke was very pro-energy. He was oil and gas congressman when he was in Texas. Sanders is going to beat him up on that. And so you just can't get past who Bernie Sanders is, and he's a socialist, and that's what Democrats are looking for in this cycle.
Okay. One of the things, because Beto is from Texas, I can't tell you how many times I heard yesterday, you know, Texas could be in play. In fact, if you look at the New York Times headline, it says why Texas is nearing battleground status. It's not just about Beto. The Week wrote Texas is now a 2020 swing state, and The Hill says O'Rourke renews Democratic hopes about turning Texas blue. Do you put much stock in that?
I really don't. I think 2018 was a unique election in Texas. It was the highest midterm turnout ever. Right. And in fact, if you look at Governor Abbott, in his race, he was able to get 44% of the Hispanic vote. Senator Cruz still did well despite being outspent 3-1 by O'Rourke. O'Rourke put together a phenomenal campaign organization.
But he
I give
lost.
him credit for that. But he lost, and that's kind of the key point to it. And you can't do that every year. And going into 2020, if O'Rourke was able to put 900 people on the ground in Texas, who knows? Maybe it becomes a little bit more in play. But I think the question is he able to raise the same sort of money running against Bernie Sanders or others that he did against Ted Cruz? And I don't see the New York and Hollywood liberals giving the money to O'Rourke versus Sanders as they did O'Rourke versus Cruz.
An exit question regarding the president getting a brushback by 12 Republicans yesterday in the Senate with the emergency declaration.
I think it helps him. Moves forward. He starts building the wall. It allows him to run in 2020. And I kept my campaign promises. I stood up to those people in my own party who didn't want me to build the wall. And yet, look there, the wall's going up. I think it puts him in a stronger position.
Chris, thank you very much. Good job. All right, 10 minutes before the top of the hour. The Covington Catholic High School student's family has already sued the Washington Post and CNN. We're talking about the Sandmans. Are more lawsuits coming? We're going to talk to his attorney next hour. Plus, new fallout for Lori Loughlin from that college admission scandal. Carly Shimkus with that coming up straight ahead.
We talked about getting involved with real crimes, about how that's a bad idea.
No, I know. It's not my fault. It's not like I go looking for this stuff. It just happens.
Wow, the fallout from the college admissions bribe scandal continues for Lori Loughlin. The Hallmark Channel confirming they have cut ties with the actress.
This as Sephora dropped their collaboration with her daughter.
Here with reaction lighting up social media, Fox News Headlines 24/7 reporter Carly Shimkus. And Carly, people are across the board. Some people feel sorry for her. Some people say good.
Yeah, there's some divided reaction. So the Hallmark Channel, it was a pretty swift decision, right, to drop her from the channel, especially because she was the face,
and
really,
the two kids
of the channel.
Out of school, out of USC.
Yeah, so sad. So the Hallmark Channel released a statement about this decision, saying, "We are saddened by the recent news surrounding the college admissions allegation. We are no longer working with Lori Loughlin and have stopped development of all productions that air on the Crown Media Family Network channels." So her daughter not only dropped by Sephora, also hair care company Tresemme. like you said, reaction is divided. There are people that are saying that Hallmark should have kept her on the channel. One from Kelly says she made a mistake. She's a mom who wanted the best for her girls and used poor judgment. Haven't we all at one time or another? Hallmark Channel is about love, understanding, forgiveness, and second chances. It's a mistake on your part to let her go. Benny says this is the right decision. Kids all over our country work incredibly hard, and parents sometimes work 2-3 jobs to help their kids get into college. These people come with all that money and walk right in. Reprehensible and disgusting. I see both sides of that argument, right?
Put it this way, a year ago, she's doing an interview and she says, I don't push my kids to get A's. That's not what me and my husband do. So you can't, if you're not going to push your kids to get A's and high marks, then they can't get into elite colleges. You can't have it both ways.
That's right. Well, they are, like you said, reportedly leaving USC because they're afraid of getting bullied and harassed. So it's just so sad. I mean, this family had everything going for them, and they threw it all away by this stupid decision.
And there are stories out this morning that the parents could actually go to jail because they're cracking down.
It's wrong to teach your kids to lie. It's wrong to lie for your kids.
Admissions are tightening up on all these colleges across the country now. They're all changing.
Yeah.
All right.
As
Thank you
they
very
should.
much, Carly.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Coming up.
All right. Congressman Adam Kinzinger and Geraldo Rivera and Nigel Farage, they're all here live.